Hi everyone, and we're back from break. And I'm just delighted that Detective Sergeant Chris Spinks is with us because he's doing a tremendous amount for that next generation that has been, I think, a theme that we've talked about in terms of a lot of the presentations today. And it's certainly, I think, the opportunity and the exposure on things like our smaller community, our community events in InfoSec is super important. So without further ado, I give you a Chris Spinks.
I was waiting for the round of applause there, but I've never had one before, so I shan't start now. Cheers, guys.
Before you continue, sorry.
Sorry?
Are we still hot? Yeah, I was just going to say before we continue, it's important to point out that Chris is not here to arrest anybody.
Yeah, right.
Well, yet.
And I'll show up now and let you continue.
Yeah, but you were
Chris.
just talking about like bodies all over the place at the next BeerCon. I'm still taking notes. Right, guys, thank you ever so much for having me on. This is a tremendous privilege for me, and I don't do too many public talks, which is probably why cons stay interesting. So I put a couple of thoughts across when Mr. Fat Hobbit gave me the opportunity as something that I might want to talk about. So I came up with the title of Our Only Hope in Innovation is Cyber Defense is Youth, Diversity and Gender Engagement. And so I kind of came up with a bit of a blueprint. But having said the word diversity and gender engagement, I'm now going to duck before Stu chucks a rant at me or a theatre fist or something. So who am I? Detective Sergeant for the Yorks and Humber Region Organised Crime Unit. I've been in policing for 23 years. Started off at the front line wearing the funny bobble hat, top hat thing, and then working my way through to intelligence, which is where I've spent a few years doing sort of some pretty sensitive intelligence areas, and then moved on into 7 years within cyber units. And that's been pretty much around the incident response, disaster recovery assistance for small, medium companies. Large companies deal with themselves. And looking at what we can do to help them, and then looking at what drives the investigations, taking those nuggets of the forensics from the back end of that and trying to put it together and finding that once again, the threat actor comes from a jurisdiction that we can't touch. So that was great. And then sort of 5 years, the last 5 years of my time have been developing tech innovation teams, tech innovation being around law enforcement tech, which they're still working on XP, so that's not difficult to innovate there. But in truth, it's looking at the problems and looking at how we can solve those problems. It's been really interesting. So pretty much this has been me when I was more fit. Yeah, I wish. Pretty much this is me when I was sitting around being very bored as a police officer. But that's pretty much what most police officers in policing are doing, is a traditional based policing. But when I moved to Yorkshire, I was given the opportunity to start developing years in industry for computer science, computer degree type students. At the time, we had a Henry. Henry was an intern, and they had no idea what to do with him. They don't mind me saying that. So I came in, and I still had no idea, but I made the choice to ask him. That's developed through, I'll talk about that journey, but in the last 12 months, I've started my own company, as well as working in the police, looking at digital transformation because of what I've learned. And that's been an interesting journey in itself. So why are you policing? Why are we talking about cyber security? Yeah, pretty much everyone knows these statistics. They're made up, they're taken from Cisco, they're taken from IBM's cost of data breach, etc., etc. And we just know that it's happening every 39 seconds. What a cyber attack isn't defined. So look at the costs. So this is, for me, really what we're looking at. Increases by nearly 300% over the COVID times. And that's a huge increase. That's what you sort of clever guys and within the support and within the IT spheres are trying to cope with, and that's pretty horrendous. And we still look at spam, 60% malicious domains, phishing, 80% reported security incidents. It still remains that user being the issue. I take, Stu, I'm saying issue in a kind and all-encompassing way, but I think user is definitely, for me, where we need to be. And I was ashamed I couldn't see the whole of Matthew's talk last. I think it's probably kind of centered around some of the same. And so it comes down to that. Why? Well, 80 data records compromised every second, and payment fraud for 2024, looking around 25 billion. on fraud. So this is pretty much faceless for fraud, but it's very, very much motivated by money. So the problem we've got in the UK is a cyber shortage, really, apparently. 18% lack necessary tech skills, 23 lack communication, leadership and management. But for me, communication here is really the point. And 18% of job applicants lack communication. That's an interesting one to ponder. If we get into 41% lacking incident management, investigation, digital forensics, well, that's a training thing. That's something that really, that can be built in, but it comes back to communication. And 36% lack skills in cybersecurity research. Now, this has been taken from Ipsos Mori and Department of Culture, Media and Sport figures, so can't be wrong, but lacks cybersecurity research skills. Pretty much everyone that I've worked with through students in the last 4 years were pretty good on cybersecurity research. So I have to question, really, lack? Or is this a communication issue? And we know full well, we've heard it. I'm going to not cause a drinking fine by saying there's a skills gap, because I disagree. I disagree there's a skills gap. Up on the screen, you can see a number of people have reached notoriety, good ways, started their own companies, age 22, 14, 12, 17. And T. Spinks, my son, 10, regularly beats the parent security controls that I can put in. I wouldn't say he lacks skills. I'd like to say he's lacked direction. Or maybe all these people have got all the skills we need, and actually what we're doing is we're just not translating them properly. And then NCA on the bottom, from 2015 figures, average age of cybercrime suspect falling to 17. Well, cybercrime, I have my own feelings around the cybercrime side. I think the prevent needs to be built up so we can divert and bring them into blue teaming, red teaming. I mean, that's where the skills are. But again, it points to not necessarily a skills gap, but maybe that sort of translation error. So let's have a look at the problem. 50% in the UK of companies have basic technical skills gaps. That's 680,000 companies in the UK have a basic technical skills gap. And they define those skills gap of even sort of being able to store and transfer public information, private identifiable information safely, detect, remove malware, setting up firewalls. I mean, these are not big skills to have. I'm pretty sure that a lot of the kids that we're seeing out there could pretty quickly have these skills and help these 680,000 companies, but they're not being given the chance. So then, just above the very strange looking giraffe, 28% businesses offering internships. So we've got 50% of all businesses have basic skills gaps, and just over a quarter of businesses out of the whole of the UK are actually offering any chance to gain experience. And let me tell you, an internship is not expensive. It definitely shouldn't be free. And I've seen those questions on LinkedIn and Twitter, and we should always be paying our kids. But what are they actually going to do? I've had feedback from others going into intern placements to say that their first line, they're answering phone calls. Okay, these are gifted individuals. Why have we got them answering phone calls? I know, yeah, character building. I know, yeah, so they understand the problem, but that's not giving them that real leg up, that real foot up. I've had others saying they're just spending day in, day out for 12 months looking at PCAP files, looking at anomalies. Sure, important, understand that, but for 12 months, we should be working better than this, I think. And these kids are our gateway into us when we're pensioners. And I understand, Ian, that I've got less years than you to get to my pension age, but it's just because I had a light paper round. But actually, why are we asking them for their thoughts? Are we asking the kids and students coming through on internships? Are we asking them for how they feel we could do it better? Not usually. So cyber sector lacks skills, but fails to offer experience. And then ducks, diversity, chucking it in there. But what are we looking at? 10% of all cyber roles in neurodivergent. That's onto the spectrum on autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculator, that's where I come in. 2% of senior roles are neurodivergent. So that's not translating to the top. 3% of senior roles are women. Ethnic minorities, 3% of senior roles, 1% of senior roles are disabled. Really isn't representing society. I'm seeing some real opportunity here, some real potential for unconscious bias recruitment issues. Maybe this is part of the problem. But why is it important? Well, it's important because of two things, many things, but two main things that I see. One, the attack is coming from society. If we don't represent society in our cyber defense, how do we understand what that attack vector looks like, what that next attack thought process is? And how do we understand what our users are doing? We heard in the last talk about the user and understanding what that user is going through. But if we don't reflect the user in our staffing, then how do we know what their problems are? How do we know why they're circumnavigating the security controls? We don't. So it comes on to me telling you there's a huge cybercrime problem. As usual, that's me doing my policing bit and being 10 years behind everything else. And the main attack vector is via the user. Yeah, nothing new there. We know that companies can't recruit into cyber roles. They label skills to define roles, but that labeling, I'm feeling, is wrong. This is where the labeling needs to be redefined. And funnily enough, they fail to attract relevant applicants and don't offer the experience to those people in there. And of course, we come on to the age-old one that we've seen many times that require years of experience, 10 years of experience for Kubernetes. Pretty sure it hasn't been around for 10 years, but I've seen the adverts asking for these unreasonable amounts. So effectively, cyber sector, our good people, all the people here, do not reflect the threat and don't reflect the users. So let's quickly go through recruitment. Heard it fantastic yesterday to go through this from Dan, I think it was, superb, summed it up really nicely. But someone leaves a new role or a new role's created, senior role, don't forget that diversity-wise, not reflection of society at all, but the senior role decides to advertise. HR gets involved, not techie at all, don't understand anything. They deal with the strategy, they deal with getting that marketing out there, and they use that existing role profile because, well, Bob's left, so we need to replace Bob with Bob. That's not moving forward. And they send out that exciting advert looking for their ideal candidate. Yeah, well, most people don't see it as an exciting advert, and as has been said previously, you know, they're asking for really unrealistic expectations on some really basic areas. And then HR do the paper sift. If it's automated or if it's not, matters not, but HR do that paper sift. And that means that they've just missed all the kids that didn't word their applications right who have the skills. And I've been there and I've seen it, because for our intern placements, we have, on the last count, on the last group, 128 applications came in for 5 roles. And within those, the applications were awful. They were truly bad, because these are kids. They're really gifted kids, but they're kids. And on a couple of applications that came in, I saw that they'd answered one of my questions. I wrote the questions, one of my questions, not applicable. It's like, yeah, I wrote the question, it probably is applicable. But one of those one-line answers was top 10 in the UK bug bounty for Tesla and Microsoft. This kid's got skills, but he would have been missed had it gone through the HR process. I took him in. Very short time later, he was headhunted by a fantastic pen test company. Superb, job done, got him into cyber. Then it comes down to the interview. That's when we start to get into the reality of meeting people, and maybe the process can rectify itself, but it's too late. So it ends up that we offer another middle-aged guy with years of experience, the same experience as the last middle-aged guy. So I think the problem is translation. Younger and older generations just don't get each other. I speak to my kids, I speak to my son, And we have fallouts many times, mostly because of communication, because what he thinks are his skills, I don't see as a translation into real world skills. But in truth, they really are. He describes his skills differently and experience really differently. But actually, when you look at that and really delve into what he's saying as a 10-year-old kid, there's real world opportunities to put application in. And of course, with younger generations now, and I speak as an older generation, despite my years, but as I'm speaking to the younger generations, they're filled with confidence. They are of a generation, and a lot of the speakers we've had here are the same people, that are used to having information on their fingertips. We can ask the voice assistant, he says, turning his off before I say the word. We can ask Google, we can ask anything else for information, and it's there at our fingertips. Why wouldn't our younger generations be hugely confident in their abilities? And this then comes down to the fact that that confidence can sometimes come across as arrogance. But this is where I say, wait, these cultural differences are the same as the societal differences. And this is again showing that split where we're not pulling in from that diverse background. And part of the reason for this. You've got to always have a cat picture. There has to be a cat picture. So the problem is the user. We know that. It's called layer rate, or whichever you want to put it, and I'm not counting them out because actually they're really important. But the user is the problem. The user needs training and educating, and the tech moves too fast for the training to evolve. The user finds the tech training boring and irrelevant, and the user is under increasing work pressure. So cuts corners, misses threat identifiers, doesn't use MFA, uses easy passwords, prints out those documents, sticks a USB in, boom, company's just been taken down. And of course, now COVID's come along and the user has just been moved away from the office environment and put into an uncontrolled environment where they have their own IoT, their own cameras, their own Wi-Fi, their own kids using their own devices and using their work devices to play games on and updating and uploading those mods which are infected onto work devices. And that's putting a lot of strain on the gifted people here that are working in InfoSec and security. But it is the user that keeps the business going. So my conclusion is that to defend ourselves, we need to recruit better. And improvement will absolutely help with bringing those new ideas in from youth, gender diversity, neurodiversity into the companies, which will help us defend better. And to change, we need the seniors, those 1%, 2%, 3%, to trust and listen to the juniors because they know their shizzle. Okay, there we are. But I know none of that's new. And I can't stand or sit in a BeerCon and put across stuff that's not new. So before you rip me apart, there's a bigger problem. The user. The user's out there. The user is always going to look to try and get around your security. And yeah, we can do some phishing training, and yeah, we can do some awareness training, but they don't think it's relevant. They don't think it's relevant because just the same as when they're on Facebook or Meta or whatever it's going to be called, and Instagram and Snapchat and everything else, they're involved in their phone. They're completely absorbed in their device. So they don't see the threat. They don't live the threat like we do. This is no great surprise to anyone. We know that the security layer builds on more security, but that takes away from functionality. So we need more functional side of our product. So we move it less security and more functional, but then it's yes usable. And it's that balance. This is the crucial point for me. And having that balance of where the user sits in that triangle, I think is key. So who could we possibly help that would help those users at home and help us in that balance? Not joking. Kids Army. Kids from all over society can help. And here's why. They get tech and they learn fast. They get tech because they live tech. That's everything they do. We need a program that builds across the country to teach our kids to defend through the basics. Remembering back, 680,000 companies just in the UK alone don't have basic security. So let's get our kids to learn the basics. MFA, password, security, not putting that USB in. And we build peer teams of kids. Now I'm saying kids, I'm talking our youth, I'm talking across society, bringing in people from anywhere from PhD students right down through Cyber First, I'm chucking it out there, anyone that comes in onto the scheme, and we build peer teams through this trusted beer farmers network, but people ultimately who are trying to do some good. And we build these peer teams out of the kids, and we pull in those kids that would have probably gone the wrong side of Computer Misuse Act. And we send those peer teams out to support the user through clinics and surgeries, put them into our elderly places, put them into our care homes, put them into companies, put them into universities, put them into churches, anywhere else. And I think this may just give us a real opportunity to provide some meaningful support to our communities. Think of all those schools, all those parents that if their kids knew what they were doing and they were trusted because they're part of this security peer team network, they could help their parents. Well, their parents are the directors, their parents are the owners of the companies. And of course, the benefit from that was the kids, they gain knowledge, they gain experience of talking audit, they get experience of talking assurance and all these lovely bits that we enjoy spending our time writing documents about, and so they get jobs. And the other benefit is that the users are then provided with a security layer. It's like a layer 8 peer team security layer. So what's a peer team? Kids with all sorts of gifts, all sorts of experience, who can drop in, they can get some experience in red teams, blue teams, yellow teams, pink teams, purple teams, whatever team you want to put them in. Just give them short-term experience. Don't get them sitting watching PCAP files or give them first tier response. Let's get them across and get them across the entire sector to get meaningful experience. And we pull in kids that are completely disenfranchised from schooling. We pull in kids that just are not interested in mainstream schooling, but let's get hold of them, let's put them in the peer teams and let's drive them forward so that we actually give them a future. And that can draw from anywhere in society. That's everything to give the user some support. Now, I'm afraid I've finished a tiny bit earlier than I'd hoped, but it's because I got excited and Ian knows what I'm like. So I just want to finish with a couple of thank yous, and that is very much thank you to the beer farmers for this absolutely awesome conference and for letting me present here, because this was something very different for policing to be part of. And I also just want to quickly say thank you to all the interns and students that I've worked with in the last 4 years for showing me what true innovation is and just reminding me to think differently. So that's it from me. Thank you ever so much for putting up with my waffle, and I'll let you get back to the real speakers.
Thank you hugely, Chris, for spinning sort of the viewpoint of everyone that was in our audience and attending the talks today, and anyone that will see that talk in the future. I kind of have a question about, like, it's clear that you're working with, the neurodiverse, those different communities. I think what's interesting is, are businesses having those conversations with you as well? Are you getting into those companies and saying, I've got potentially something that you should pay attention to, or something you should embrace?
Absolutely. We are starting to see that happen. And it's absolutely truly wonderful, because I do believe that the only way that we can really start to make a difference for both the kids that are coming through our pipeline and for the companies that are reaching out is to work together. We have to work smarter, because this is a faster evolving problem than a siloed company can evolve to. And as I've said already, we've had kids taken into pen test companies. We've had kids go through to some fantastic companies locally, which is giving real opportunity for those kids. But the main thing that happens for me is that people don't just see their application. Because we're able to put these kids into the companies for short periods of time and let them work with them, they realize that actually the neurodivergence or the cultural difference or the gender difference or anything else really doesn't matter. These kids and these young people are just gifted individuals, and they have wonderful viewpoints that can really enrich any company they go into. But for me, this is why I think the question doesn't come for what we can do as policing. I've just done a proof of concept. That's all we've done here. This is not something particularly new, but this needs to really scale up across the communities and start see where we can really enhance digital transformation across those companies that would never even see the opportunity for taking on an intern.
Yeah, you said that you I've only done a proof of concept. I think you can actually shorten that to at least you've done something. Like, I keep hearing about problems in the industry, but I don't actually see the same people complaining there's problems trying to make solutions. Or at least even just go, here's my idea, I know it's crap, someone take it, open source it, do what you want with it, you build on it, build something and continue on. It's just here's a problem, right, I'm off now, bye. like let's actually try and fix it. So it's awesome to see.
There's a lot of that around, isn't there? And it's obviously, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a relevant thing to say. The feedback's been great. You've inspired somebody that's actually said you've inspired them. So that's a good outcome, right?
I think he was referring to the last speaker. He was just delayed on his text. That's what it was.
Did he have an echo as well?
They definitely aimed at yourself, Chris. So absolutely brilliant. And everybody can do more, but it's great seeing it in action and it being outcome driven, and that's what everything really should be about when we're talking about improving life chances for individuals, whoever they are.
We've seen, I was just going to say, we've seen that, for an example, one kid that came through looked at one of the processes being used by policing to move images across, get a hash for that image, move it across onto a file, create a couple of documents from it and stick it out. That was taking each copper around an hour and a half to do. He automated it. It took him a bit of automation to pull it from the sources and get it all hashed properly, but he automated it. The net saving for UK law enforcement was estimated to be around £600,000 for about 4 months of one young person's work. But this process is not unique to policing. All the companies out there that are manipulating spreadsheets or doing payroll or doing all these things, these kids can help that.
I just as a kind of final point from me, I attended a talk at B-Sides Manchester in 2017, and one of the speakers was talking about, and I can only cite the number that she used in her talk, so that's the only basis for this statistic that I've got. But she said that it was estimated that 42% of the people convicted of cybercrime in the UK were neurodiverse, and which is a high number relative to the per capita. So rather than just kind of look at that number and bemoan it as being a tragedy, the NCSC and law enforcement in the UK, the NCA and all those people are actually trying to go into those environments and catch these kids at a young age and put them on the right path and get them into communities of probably very similar people, but doing the right thing before they get to that tipping point of being alone in their bedroom doing the wrong thing. And I think that's fascinating. I think not a lot of people really understand that stuff goes on. And you've highlighted an example of it does go on, and it's fantastic.
It happens regularly, and it's the partnerships with companies out there that provide, like for example, gamified learning platforms and hacking platforms and things like that work with us that allow us to then put that diversion tactic in. But it needs to be better.
Yeah. There are other programs overseas. I mean, I want to actually give them a shout out because they're basically in the Netherlands and they're doing similar-ish stuff. It's called Hack Right. They're fantastic. Just the idea of trying to get kids who are bored to do the right thing and actually help policing, help businesses, help keep people safe. Yeah, that's awesome.
Totally is.
All right. Well, we're going to say goodbye to Chris. Goodbye, Chris.
Thanks for having me, guys.